Hi, and welcome to News in Depth. I'm Adam Lowenstein. On today's episode, we'll tell you about two stories of criminal justice and what happens after the violence goes away. We'll take a look at the case of Justin Heyne, the Titusville man who could head to death row after his conviction for murdering 3 people, including a 5-year-old girl who saw her parents killed before she herself was shot. The jury last week recommended execution for the 28-year-old Heyne, whom public defenders attempted to portray as a drug-addicted, mentally damaged man. But there's at least one more step in the process. And we'll spend some time elsewhere in Titusville, in the Deleon neighborhood, an often tough place that was the site of a double murder last month. But Deleon is about much more than crime scenes and violence, as you'll hear. And city leaders, police, and residents are working to spark a revitalization. Then it's on to space and the long-running relationship between the Air Force, the hardy Delta II rocket, and Global Positioning System satellites. That relationship is concluding after 20 years with the launch of a GPS satellite from Port Canaveral Air Force Station. It's the 48th Delta II GPS launch since 1989. And we'll have a visit from our education team, Michelle Spitzer and Megan Downs, who will tell us how that old stalwart, the GI Bill, is helping boost enrollment at area colleges. And it just wouldn't be an episode of News in Depth without a hurricane tip, so we'll toss one of those in for you too. This time it's about safeguarding your electronic equipment. But first up, it's all aboard the thriving cruise industry at Port Canaveral. It was 25 years ago this year that multi-day cruising began on the Space Coast with the SS Royale. What a great name for a ship. Remember that vessel? Quaint by today's standards, the Big Red Boat, as it was also known, had room for about 1,100 passengers. But like the port itself, cruising has changed and grown. Now, Port Canaveral is home to several operators and much, much larger ships, including the 3,600 passenger Freedom of the Seas from Royal Caribbean, which is currently the biggest cruise ship in the world. Here's a look at how the cruise industry helped define the port and shape it into one of the region's major economic engines.
Many longtime Brevard County residents may recall seeing the SS Royale resting along the docks of Port Canaveral. The original Big Red Boat was a sight with its long red hull and a giant orange and red P atop the freighter, signifying its parent company, Premier Cruise Lines. It has been 25 years since that boat first came to Port Canaveral, marking the first time a multi-day cruise ship called Brevard County home. It was also the beginning of what would transfer the county's sleepy little cargo port into the second busiest cruise terminus in the world. Premier's success at Port Canaveral caught the attention of Carnival Cruise Lines, which in 1990 based its 1,100-plus passenger Carnival at the port. Carnival liked what it saw, and after Port Canaveral built its first mega terminal, number 5, Carnival moved its 2,600 passenger ship, the Fantasy, to the port in 1993. From there, the port really started to expand its clientele. Disney entered the port in 1998 with its family-oriented cruises and its ship, Disney Magic. The Disney Wonder would join the Magic at the port a year later. Also in 1998, Norwegian Cruise Lines began offering 7-day cruises with its Norwegian Crown. Royal Caribbean joined in 2000 with the Sovereign of the Seas. In 2003, Carnival made its move by bringing in the Glory, a 110,000-ton vessel, which to that point would be the largest ship homeported in Port Canaveral. The ship holds 3,000 passengers and 1,150 crew members. Within months, Royal Caribbean one-upped Carnival by bringing in the Mariner of the Seas, a 138,000-ton behemoth that holds more than 3,100 passengers and nearly 1,200 crew members. Just this year, Royal Caribbean took another step forward when it replaced Mariner with Freedom of the Seas, a 160,000-ton floating city capable of holding more than 3,600 passengers and 1,360 crew members. As of right now, Freedom is the largest cruise ship in the world. Port Canaveral's last cruise-specific economic impact study was done in 2003, showing that the port is responsible for an estimated 9,000 jobs, $212.5 million in wages, and $163 million in annual economic output in Brevard County. So what does the future hold for the port and its cruise industry? In December, Carnival will bring in its largest ship in its fleet, the Dream. The Dream can accommodate 3,652 passengers. Also, in 2011 and 2012, Disney will replace the Magic and Wonder with twin 122,000-ton ships, the Dream and Fantasy, capable of holding 4,000 passengers. Each ship will be 3 decks taller and carry about 1,300 more passengers than Disney's existing ships. Renovations to terminals and dredging to accommodate larger ships also will be taking place at Port Canaveral in the months and years to come.
If you want to see Port Canaveral's cruise industry in all its majestic glory, head down to the port on a Sunday afternoon when several ships depart for the Bahamas. It's really quite a sight to behold. Now to the Justin Heyne case. In 2006, Heyne was living with a couple, Benjamin Hamilton and Sarah Bukowski, and their 5-year-old daughter, Ivory, in Titusville. There was drug use and drug dealing going on, authorities said. And on March 30th of that year, an argument escalated into gunfire. Ivory and her father died at the scene, and Bukowski died 2 days later. In July, a jury of 9 women and 3 men found Heyne guilty of the murders, and then earlier this month, they recommended the death penalty. Here's a look at the case that has captivated and horrified the Space Coast since its violent beginning.
Convicted killer Justin Heyne will never enjoy freedom again. Now, the only thing uncertain about his future is whether he will die by lethal injection. Last week, a jury recommended death for Heyne, who was convicted of murdering his roommates, Benjamin Hamilton, Sarah Bukowski, and their 5-year-old daughter, Ivory. As the case wore on, witnesses painted a grisly picture of a night where things went terribly wrong. Neighbor Yvette Bernard was the first one to find the victims. She heard Bukowski crying for help, and when she went in the house, found Benjamin Hamilton bleeding on his bed, gasping for air, and Bukowski struggling for life on the floor. That's when she made the worst discovery of all.
When I backed up from Sarah and told her I was going to get help, that was when when I turned around, that was when I noticed Ivory Hamilton. She was in the fetal position. Her head was laying this way, and there was no blood around her, but I placed 2 fingers on her neck, and I knew just by looking at her that she was already deceased.
Heyne offered to plead guilty in exchange for 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. But the state attorney's office found the killings to be especially atrocious, hideous, and cruel, and pursued the death penalty. Judge O.H. Eaton will have the final say as to Heyne's future. Regardless of the decision, the families of Sarah Bukowski and Benjamin and Ivory Hamilton must live with the pain and void of losing their family members.
My other grandchildren talk about her a lot. We miss her very much. We miss everybody, all 3. The girls still have a few belongings of Ivory's that they won't let go of, so it's good. It's good. They remember them in a very positive way, and that is how we want it. That's how we want it.
Now, Judge Eaton has not said when he will give his recommendation for Heyne's sentence. He does have the final say. But we'll bring his decision to you as soon as he makes it. A more recent violent incident in Titusville involving the murder of 2 people took place in the city's Deleon neighborhood. That's an enclave of about 3,000 people that has seen its share of crime and blight. But city officials, residents, and others are working to make it a better place. Take a look.
The Deleon community is a community that's older. It's a community that unfortunately has not had a lot of economic support, primarily because I think it has fallen into the mode of complacency. Its people are really has just accepted it for what it is, an older community that really needs a lot of revitalization. Neighborhood restoration is something that is crucial to that community. But the reputation that it has for being crime-ridden and a bad and poverty-stricken, I think is also, I would have to blame it on government. That is where they dropped all the government housing units. And when you place those kind of things, you put it at a disadvantage for a certain part, and you begin to segregate, not necessarily by race, but more because of economics. And with economic situations, when I'm hungry, I'm going to figure out how to eat.
A recent $2.1 million grant through the Neighborhood Stabilization Program will help the city demolish the crumbling Inspiration Point housing complex, and officials are seeking an additional $7 million from that program. Staying in northern Brevard County, but in a more uplifting, literally, vein, is the story of the Air Force, GPS, and the Delta II rocket. This triumvirate has forged a mutually beneficial relationship over the last 20 years that is coming to an end. Global Positioning System spacecraft are getting too big and too wide to launch on the Delta II. It's long been the workhorse rocket of the military fleet and has boosted almost 50 GPS satellites to orbit, helping the military and civilians navigate vehicles by land, air, and sea for decades. We caught up with the team working on the final Delta II GPS launch out at Launch Complex 17.
On February 14, 1989, the first Delta II rocket was launched from Canaveral Air Station carrying an Air Force satellite to be used for a global positioning system. Known as Navstar and later renamed GPS, the launch would be the first of 48 scheduled GPS satellite launches at Canaveral Air Station, carried out initially by McDonnell Douglas, then Boeing, and for the past 3 years by United Launch Alliance. Vic Siegel, Mike Bruce, and Dave Grant all have been with the program since its inception and talk about their roles in making the Delta II launches happen.
I've been associated with Delta program since 1989 when I retired from the Air Force. As a spacecraft integrator, we're responsible for handling the payloads from a booster integration standpoint in order to make sure that they're all satisfied with all of our support. We are proud to have handled NASA's scientific payloads, the Global Positioning System payload, the MER payload, the 2 rovers that are on Mars, we launched those, the Spitzer Space Telescope, all those things successfully in place, as well as the commercial programs that Delta has launched. Sorry to see it go. This GPS will culminate 20 years of work on the Delta II GPS program, but we do have other missions like NASA payloads in the very near future.
Back when I was with the Air Force, I went to a squadron officer training school, and I'm an engineer. So when I get to the squadron officer training school, I'm with these Air Force pilots who are your typical heroes for most of us. And when they found out that I was here at the Cape launching GPS satellites, I became the hero for the pilots. And that was a really extraordinary experience for me.
I'm in spacecraft integration. I'm fairly new to that position. I was in launch operations for 10 years before this. Came here in 1988 as an Air Force member and was stationed here for 10 years, and then joined the Boeing team in 98 and been here ever since, and now in EULA. I find incredible with the Delta II is how successful it's been. We've had 48 in a row, and it just never gave up. It's a great rocket system. We've put many, many missions with the Mars, the GPS, Global Star, and it's just a very proud moment for me to be all the way through from beginning to end for the GPS program.
The 48th and final Delta II GPS launch occurred Monday morning, completing a program that saw 47 of 48 successful launches. The only setback came on January 17, 1997, when Delta 241 exploded 13 seconds after launch due to a rupture in a graphite epoxy casing. But while Monday's launch marked the final Air Force Delta II mission, the Delta II will continue to launch for other government and commercial customers.
Future GPS spacecraft would fly on larger rockets like the Delta IV or Atlas V. From an ending to a beginning. School started last week, and there are plenty of storylines for our education team to follow. Two of them include the GI Bill and its impact on enrollment at two area schools, and how Brevard Public Schools is examining the interaction between outside groups and students. Here are Michelle Spitzer and Megan Downs with another installment of Cram Session on the Air.
Welcome to Cram Session on the Air, your source for education news in Brevard County. I'm Megan Downs.
And I'm Michelle Spitzer. We're reporting from Brevard Community College's Melbourne campus. Students returned to BCC yesterday for the start of the fall semester. Officials are expecting it to be another record semester as far as enrollment. Over the past 2 years, enrollment has increased 16.5% here at BCC. Classes also got underway yesterday at Florida Tech. Officials at both schools are expecting their veteran student population to increase thanks to the new post-9/11 GI Bill and the Yellow Ribbon Program. They're for veterans who have served at least 36 months on active duty following the terrorist attacks in 2001, or have been discharged because of a disability after serving at least 30 days. In some cases, spouses and dependents also are eligible for the programs. So far, the program has allowed BCC to enroll roughly 70 students. Over at Florida Tech, 16 students have taken advantage of the new program. Officials at both schools expect these numbers to increase as word gets out about the program. If you need further information, you can contact Florida Tech at 674-8136 or BCC at 433-7333 or 433-5532.
The Brevard County School Board is reviewing a policy that prohibits outside groups from addressing students. The policy's been in place for about 2 years, but groups such as the Boy Scouts have said that it's hurt their membership. They've lost about 1,000 scouts since the ban began in 2007. They've gone from 5,000 scouts to about 4,000 today. The school board has asked Attorney Harold Beislein to take another look at the policy. He's going to come up with a draft and bring it before the board within the next couple of meetings. Also on Friday, Heritage High will be having its dedication of the Roberto Clemente Sports Complex. Clemente was a baseball great and a humanitarian who's revered by many Hispanics in the community. They in fact had wanted the school to be named after him, but after a naming committee got together, they decided that a more neutral name would be efficient for the school, coming up with Heritage High School. So as a compromise, Principal John Tuttle recommended to the school board that the athletic complex be named after Roberto Clemente. The public is invited to the dedication ceremony. That's Friday, August 21st, 6 p.m. at the Heritage High campus. That's on the westernmost end of Malabar Road.
Well, that does it for another edition of Cram Session on the Air. Be sure to tune in to floridatoday.com/education for all your education news. We'll see you back here next time.
The Brevard School Board could discuss draft proposals of the outside group policy at its August 25th meeting. And finally today, the moment you've all been waiting for, our weekly hurricane preparation video. Today you'll learn ways to protect your computer and other electronic equipment.
If it appears a hurricane is heading our way on the Space Coast, advanced electronic preparation is important. Most people store important information on their hard drives, so the destruction of these files can be devastating. To avoid this, make 2 copies of your important files by burning them to a CD. Keep one with you in case of evacuation, and put the other in a safe location. Unplug all power cords and move equipment away from windows. Next, cover all the equipment with heavy-duty trash bags. In the aftermath, there is a possibility outlets have been exposed to moisture. Wait until they are dry, and then test an inexpensive lamp in the outlet before plugging in your computer.
Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday with more about the stories and the people of the Space Coast. I'm Adam Lowenstein. I look forward to seeing you then.